It's Wisconsin Today. I'm Rob Farrett.
And I'm Kate Archer-Kent. The public viewing of Pope Francis is underway in St. Peter's Basilica, where the Pope will lie in state until his funeral on Saturday morning, which is expected to be attended by world leaders, including President Trump.
Known as the People's Pope, spreading a message of inclusivity and love, people around the globe are mourning his death, including here in Wisconsin.
Thousands of miles away from the Vatican, we'll hear from a Milwaukee Catholic priest and historian about the legacy of Pope Francis and what his death means for Catholics here.
First, we turn to a Wisconsin student journalist who's studying abroad in Italy and reporting on the ceremonies and traditions following the death of the pontiff.
Adam Chaikin is an undergraduate student at UW-Madison studying economics and strategic communication, and we're reaching him in Florence, Italy. Adam, welcome to Wisconsin Today.
Hello, thank you for having me.
I understand you've been out in the streets a bit, talking with people in Italy about the death of Pope Francis. What are you hearing?
Yeah, I'm here in the Florence City Center, and quite to my surprise, things kind of feel as if they're normal. And to be quite frank, if I have not found any news on it and it was not blowing up headlines, I would not have known that the Pope had died. And in fact, I've talked to some locals and a lady who's from Poggibonsi, which is the outside of the city center, and it's a pretty similar situation there as well.
And you haven't seen any types of memorials popping up or anything that you've seen around churches?
I actually was looking out for that and I haven't. Yeah, I will say though, I mean the people are sad and they're obviously upset, but no one is crying. And relating back to that note about these memorials for him, from what I've been hearing, Saturday is the day that everything might be a little bit different when the funeral's going on and extra church bells and stuff like that. But until then, I don't know if we'll see anything.
And you plan to travel to Rome to take in the funeral. How are you preparing for that?
Look, I'm going to it more as a cultural experience. I think it's a once in a lifetime opportunity to be here when that's happening. But it's going to be very chaotic. Also talking to people, the gist of Catholic followers who are mourning his death, they're not going to Rome. They want to follow along on TV. That's their way of showing their respect and keeping up to date. So I'm expecting the crowd to be, I mean, a very significant group of people who are very invested in the cause, but not your average Catholic.
And I would imagine security would be pretty tight. Are you going to be, going there as a journalist or more like just someone, taking it in?
Taking it in. I think it's important to know after talking to people that Pope Francis was someone who they felt connected to because he is very simple. Look at it where he's getting buried and look at his name, St. Francis. But it's a lot different of a feel than when the previous Pope left the church. And I'll compare him really quick. I mean, the difference and why I want to go is because people respect him. And when Benedict left the church, they were almost relieved. That was the feeling. And so I think it's important for me to see what this respect looks like and what these people want in the future going forward.
Adam, thank you for joining us and safe travels.
Yep, thank you.
Adam Chaikin is a UW-Madison undergraduate student studying abroad in Italy, reporting on the death of Pope Francis there, and we reached him in Florence. Now we turn to Father Stephen Avella, a Catholic priest in Milwaukee and emeritus professor of history at Marquette University. Father Avella, welcome to Wisconsin Today.
Delighted to be with you. Thank you so much.
You say that Pope Francis was your hero. How are you feeling in this moment?
Sad. I loved him. I really did. Sorry, little overcome here this morning just thinking about him, but a good man. a man of simplicity, a man of the gospel, a man who reinvigorated the vitality and power of Christianity in the world, mostly by his example and by his simplicity. Um, a very, very pleasant, he will be a pleasant memory. His memory will be a blessing, as our Jewish brothers and sisters tell us, at least for me.
How do you live his example in your own life?
I desire to, and I want to imitate his simplicity. You know, being part of an organized religious tradition as I am, I'm a priest, and it involves a lot of ritual activity and things that are beautiful and meaningful, and they're part of our lived experience as Catholics. But sometimes some of the flumery, I call it, or some of the pomp and circumstance gets in the way of the power of the gospel message, that Jesus came that we might have life and have it more abundantly. And that is how I try to imitate Francis in my life. Simplicity, the simple Roman rite of the Mass, for example, those things. I really appreciated that he remained so down to earth for his whole pontificate.
Someone had said that sticks with me, that Pope Francis brought God down to us. How do you see where the church goes from here?
Well, it goes forward. And I'm a church historian, so I look at the big picture. Do we have problems in our own time, particularly in the state of Wisconsin? I mean, I was just looking at some of the statistics. You know, the practice of organized religion in Wisconsin is declining. And fewer and fewer people claim a church affiliation. And I understand that. And I understand that people differentiate between spirituality and religion. Uh, but the loss of community that suggests, that no people no longer want to be part of our worshiping, learning, charitable activities. Um, this is a concern to me, and we have to deal with that. We have to face up to that. That being said, every generation has its challenges. Every generation. I taught U.S. history at Marquette for many years, and I taught the 1950s. And in those days, everybody thought Elvis Presley was an indicator of the decline of American civilization. Elvis Presley, of all people. But there's enough naysayers and people who say, you know, we really kind of got to get back on the track and we got to go back to the good old days, whatever those were. Francis kept us looking forward. The light of the gospel, the joy of the gospel is yet to be released and incarnated in a particular time and place. And so the church will go forward. Within a month or so, we'll have a new pope, a new holy father, someone who will lead us in whatever direction he sees fit. And for us Catholics, the sacraments will be celebrated. People will be coming into the church. People will be leaving the church. That being said, the Catholic tradition and the Catholic way of approaching life, death, resurrection is something that has perduring value. It may be diminished in certain times and eras, but it will go forward.
Father Avella, can you talk more about how Pope Francis is replaced and who the College of Cardinals is and how this decision goes forward?
All right. Well, the cardinals are men who are selected basically to be electors of the Pope. Many of them are also bishops of very large and prestigious dioceses, or they hold offices in the Vatican. But their primary task is to vote for the Pope. There are over 200 cardinals. I think perhaps now, but I don't have the exact number. I think maybe a little bit more than 130 plus are eligible to vote. That is, they're under the age of 80. What's happening here? What's going on right now? Well, this is a very human process. These cardinals are talking to each other. they're caucusing. They know each other in various circumstances and locations, and they're going to come together in Rome and be together and be looking at each other and sizing up what needs to be done. They will go to the papal funeral. They will then have days of mourning, 9 days of mourning afterwards, and then they will gather to hear little speeches among themselves.
There's
And
a
then they will,
political undertone here. I mean, when you say caucusing together and hearing some speeches, that
yeah,
makes me
yeah,
feel like that. Yeah.
it's a human process, and they just had this movie Conclave, and people, friends of mine, were horrified that how could they do that. I mean, some of the plot was a little hokey, I would say, but yeah, the cardinals talk to each other. I studied papal conclaves from the 19th century down to the present. um, in the conclave of 1903, just to give you an example, the cardinals elected a pope, a guy by the name of Cardinal Rampolla. The Austrian emperor, using an ancient privilege that he had, vetoed the election of that pope and said, he cannot be pope. I don't want him. And then they ended up electing a man we know as Pius X. Talk about politics.
Hmm.
That was kind of brutal. You basically disestablish a papal election. Um, there are conflicts among the cardinals. This was certainly the case in 1922 when Pius XI was elected. 1939, Pope Pius XII was elected, but the world was on the verge of war, and everybody knew that this man, who had been the
Hmm.
Secretary of State, was really the best candidate. So yes, they talk among themselves, they argue, they
And they
strategize,
communicate.
and they
Yeah.
seek to round up votes. Yes, that happens, but
Hmm.
that's not a scandal. I mean, that's
That's
we kind of
process.
get we're
Yeah.
agog at it when we see it happen in the legislature or Congress, but this is a very human process out of which we believe something good will happen.
Father Avella, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
That is Father Stephen Avella, Catholic priest and emeritus professor of history at Marquette University.
Coming up, a Wisconsin group launches new ways to fight human trafficking during the NFL draft.
We know human trafficking has existed in our state, in our county, and so we truly hope this is a catalyst to bring awareness and education on this issue as a whole.
Hear from the organization Awaken Wisconsin. That's next on WPR News.
It's Wisconsin Today. I'm Kate Archer-Kent.
And I'm Rob Farrett. The Green Bay area is expecting upwards of 250,000 people to turn out over the 3 days of the NFL draft that gets underway tomorrow.
And such an influx of visitors could also heighten the risk of human trafficking. That is the recruitment of people and the selling of people for sex.
Anti-human trafficking advocates have seen examples of that happening when other cities have hosted the draft. This time they're trying to proactively address it in Green Bay.
Earlier this year, the Brown County Board awarded $20,000 to the nonprofit organization Awaken Wisconsin for human trafficking prevention and education efforts in the lead up to the event.
We're learning more about the efforts on the ground in Green Bay and preventative measures that can be applied in any community.
Keisha Klaus is executive director of Awaken Wisconsin. Keisha, welcome to Wisconsin Today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
How serious of an issue is human trafficking around an event like this that's billed as a family-friendly atmosphere?
Yeah, so obviously the commodification of a human being should never be something that's normalized and is a very, very serious issue. What we've stated for the past year leading up for the draft is we know human trafficking has existed in our state, in our county before the draft. It will continue to exist during the draft and will remain after the draft. And so we truly hope this is a catalyst to bring awareness and education on this issue as a whole. Obviously, there's controversy on is there actually an increase or a higher demand for trafficking during large events like this. And for our community and as our organization, we've just held to the stance of It doesn't matter whether there will be an increase or not. What we do know, again, is this issue already exists here. So why aren't we going to do the preventative measures to make sure this is a safe event for everyone? What harm can it do bringing more awareness to this? But then in addition to that, if you think about what the result would be if we didn't do preventative work, it could mean someone's life. And so why not take those extra measures just to make sure this is an event that everyone wants to be in a positive light for Green Bay? And we're really excited to have it hosted here.
What lessons have you been able to take away from NFL drafts held in other cities?
So when we've done some research leading up to Green Bay hosting the draft, we did call other service providers similar to what we do here in Brown County and what we noticed and heard from them. And so we feel like frontline experience and anecdotal data also have a very important lens when collecting stats on what it could look for. And they stated that there was concern in emergency services and a higher prevalence of outreach services needed. And so that's where our focus really has been. One, on prevention, and then two, on what emergency services will we be able to have available here in Brown County.
What might emergency services look like? What do you know so far?
Services for emergency cases would be shelter is always the biggest need, not only during the draft, but outside of the draft. So we have worked with certain hotels to solidify some housing during specifically draft days. We also worked with another nonprofit that was able to donate their Airbnb for the weekend of the draft. So we would have the availability to have emergency housing during the draft. And then we know basic needs. So having our Awaken Center available for shower utilization, food readily available, a warm place to stay. We are working with local law enforcement as well in case there is an individual who's wanting to report something or a situation. In addition, we're working with nonprofits across the state and even the nation. We have a nonprofit that is coming in and provide safe flights actually outside of the state to certain programs. Again, providing them a way out if they wanted it, but also security and safety if needed to be out of the state.
You know, sometimes communities may shift blame or shift the focus of trafficking and see it, you know, an issue of larger cities like Chicago or Milwaukee. How common is human trafficking in the Green Bay area when it's not hosting a major event like this?
So the DOJ, Wisconsin DOJ, established a report in 2020 that stated 72 counties in Wisconsin have reported some form of sex trafficking. 72 counties. There are 72 counties in our state. So that means every county has had some form of trafficking reported. I know specifically for us, we service the Brown County area and some surrounding areas, but our focus is Brown County. Since June of 2022, which was our inception, we have served over 190 women, 11 years old being our youngest referral, 69 being our oldest. Our average age served is 28 to 29 years old. We are estimating about 5.5 new referrals a month.
Wow. Do you have the resources to adequately address this issue? Because you also received $20,000 from Brown County Board to fight human trafficking ahead of the NFL draft. What are the circumstances like with your funding, and what has it allowed you to do?
Yeah, we were so excited about the county providing those funds because I think in addition to just alleviating some of the funding concerns, it allowed the population we serve to know that our county sees them and hears them and wants to support them, especially during what could be a time that, you know, housing is more restricted. Law enforcement is going to be pretty inundated as well. And so knowing that there are additional services available and funding may not be a concern is huge. But 20 out of the 20,000, 10,000 of it was going for preventative services, which we've been able to host many trainings and education classes within our community. We've been able to work with businesses and training them, providing flyers that are specific for service industry employees, again, giving them the most common indicators, as well as how can they assist, what could they do, localizing efforts. And so working with 6 different nonprofits to make sure we are all supporting each other and can kind of provide better wraparound services. We have koozies that have been distributed, as well as drink covers to prevent date rape drugs to be hopefully less prevalent with that protective factor. But on those koozies and those drink covers are QR codes that link to Awaken's website that, again, gives the most common indicators. And so really having the best preventative tools out there that we could, letting individuals know that there are services available for this population.
We're talking about human trafficking prevention efforts at the NFL draft in Green Bay. We have Awaken Wisconsin Executive Director Keisha Klaus with us. Keisha, in your interactions with businesses in leading up to the NFL draft, what types of involvement and partnership are businesses giving to you as you look to address this issue?
The businesses have been very receptive. Overall, they actually have said, I can't believe we've, as a community, waited this long to bring awareness to this issue. For us, that was pretty powerful. And so a lot of businesses don't really know how they could be engaged. Besides, I think monetarily, they feel limited in their resources. But when we've been able to be creative, for example, we have Chick-fil-A donate meals to our peer support groups and our celebration nights. We've had larger corporations donate toilet paper and paper towels, and again, helping to meet those basic needs. But so importantly, too, is educating your employees. And so a lot of these businesses, especially financial institutions, can be on the front lines of recognizing these indicators. And if they don't have the education or awareness, they may slip right past them. And so training hospitals, training financial institutions, banks, anything of this, credit unions, and then just hotels, motels, gas stations, restaurants. This is more than an Awaken issue. It's a community-wide issue. It's a state issue. And so really it's going to take all of us being more vigilant in reporting and noticing, being able to better identify survivors, and then knowing who to call, who are the resources locally that can help step in and provide these wraparound services.
In terms of those wraparound services, you mentioned emergency housing, emergency shelter to assist human trafficking survivors. Housing has been a big issue with the NFL draft and where people are staying. Can you talk more about shelter and the issue of housing?
Sure. And I think that issue with housing affects so many other populations and nonprofits. And so it's something as a community we're all trying to collaborate on and see what are additional resources that we can offer. We partner pretty closely with the homeless shelter here in Brown County, as well as other shelters available. But obviously, there also can be barriers. So if they don't qualify for services, or if they, have a severe felony on their record that would prohibit them being able to have shelter, that's where we've seen the biggest limitations. So again, as an organization, just for the draft, we have a safe home, but our usual services do not include having the ability to have shelter. So we are really reliant on other organizations that is their focus, and we can partner with them in the housing service and being able to offer that.
Recently, we talked with the executive director of the Women's Center in Waukesha about some of the challenges that come up with helping human trafficking survivors. Let's listen to Angela Mancuso and what she had to say.
A lot of times, traffickers are really good at ensuring their victims have criminal activity. It's a means of keeping them there, right? So it might be solicitation, tickets, could be drug charges, something like that.
So what kind of things can you do for a trafficking survivor in those circumstances who might be worried about getting in trouble with the law if they leave?
So we have a great relationship with our local law enforcement. And so we created an Awaken helps facilitate a multidisciplinary team. And so on that team is again, local law enforcement, FBI, Wisconsin DOJ, CPS, and through cases like that where there are barriers, and if it really is a small warrant for someone getting safety and receiving services to be able to leave this life of exploitation, a lot of times they'll work with us and partner with us. We had a case in which we were working with an individual, and between law enforcement, our district attorney's office, her probation agent, we actually were able to have her time served at a program, and she graduated. The judge actually ended up closing her case and saying, you did all the work, you put in all the effort, and you really have received such strong restorative care and services that we're willing to dismiss this case. And so I think if your community can get creative, especially in individuals that are willing to put in the work and change the outcomes of that lifestyle, it really is that collaborative effort that makes the difference.
What happens when you view human trafficking as well through a public health prevention perspective versus a criminal justice point of view?
Yeah, so I think our state as a whole, we have struggled with providing more relief for survivors under the law. And so a lot of states have taken the lens of being able to offer vacatur or expungement with collateral charges. So currently in the state of Wisconsin, we only provide vacatur for solicitation prostitution charges. But as stated in that recording, a lot of the women we work with have additional collateral charges. And so a lot of states have allowed for that vacatur on certain collateral convictions if they can prove that during their trafficking, that is when they received those convictions. And so because of their trafficker or at the whim of their trafficker, mercy of their trafficker, some of these charges were put on their records. If they can prove that trafficking existed during that time, they could be vacated. And so that's allowing a lot of relief for these individuals because many of the women and girls that we serve, they do have extensive records, and that bars them from being able to on the restorative lens of things, get adequate jobs so they can be self-sustaining. So again, creating another barrier. And so I think from a legislative standpoint, we do have some improvement to make on that systemic change.
Turning our attention back to the NFL draft here, what are some of the common red flags that people should be aware of, even if they're not going to be in Green Bay for the draft?
Sure. So with the draft specifically, the indicators that we're most commonly expecting, but what we see even outside of the draft are dominating individuals. So if there is a person that is not able to make decisions, that seems like a third party has control over them, they're more evasive and elusive when being asked questions or making eye contact with that dominating figure, that would be, something that definitely should allow someone overseeing the situation to ask more questions or just possibly report. In addition, if there are individuals with large amounts of cash, gift cards, hotel keys, those can be indicators as well. And then if an individual is coming to Brown County and they may actually not even know which city they're currently in, could be an indicator. And then appropriate dress. And so obviously weather appropriate outfits is another indicator. So there's quite a few, but those would be the most common ones that we are highlighting just for individuals to be acknowledged of and insightful of. And then the most common one that would hopefully be most apparent would be physical injuries to a person. So any bruises or bite marks or anything indicating physical abuse.
Human trafficking can be so difficult to measure, as you said earlier, with precise statistics. But how will you determine whether your efforts for this weekend are successful?
So we are big on data because we believe data tells the story. With the population we work with, obviously, there's a lot of trauma involved. And so it is never our story to tell. It's never our journey to share. And so that can be really difficult, and helping people understand the women and girls we work with. And so data is one of the ways we can say, okay, the most common pathway of entry into sex trafficking in our area is familial trafficking or through relationship. And so through those stats, we're able to communicate that to our community and say what we see most commonly endured here. And so I think during the draft, we're taking that even to a next step of keeping stats that we wouldn't normally keep. And so we use a database called Apricot that is VOCA and VAWA approved, and it allows us to be able to pull reports. And we specifically, especially working with the county and the funding we've received, we want to see what efforts worked, because we already have Philadelphia, I believe, is the next hosting city. And so they've already reached out to us and said, hey, we've seen your preventative efforts and we love what you guys are doing. Do you mind sharing with us after the fact, again, what you saw most commonly, what seemed to work, where your biggest barriers were? And that was our heart going into this is, we called other hosting cities and there wasn't much available. And we thought, man, that's such a missed opportunity. And how can we help the next hosting city do better or learn from our mistakes? And so we want to be able to provide that not only for our own community, but in future hosting cities as well.
Keisha, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for this conversation.
Sure. Thank you for having me. And awareness is such a vital tool in this effort. So we just appreciate what you guys are willing to do as far as reporting on it as well.
Keisha Klaus is the executive director of Awaken Wisconsin. She was with us to share her nonprofit's efforts to prevent human trafficking during the NFL draft in Green Bay that gets underway tomorrow.
Coming up, mark the 125th anniversary of Wisconsin's state park system with a visit to our oldest park, Interstate, in northwestern Wisconsin.
In this area right here, we have lots of glacial potholes, with Wisconsin, as we always like to say, having the world's most perfect pothole on our side of the river.
That's next on Wisconsin Today. You're listening to Wisconsin Today. I'm Rob Farrett.
And I'm Kate Archer-Kent. Now it's time for Wisconsin Life. Here's producer Maureen McCullum with a story about an annual family reunion.
Writer McKenna Shear is a proud Wisconsinite. Sure, that love is tied to cheese and spotted cow, but at the root of that love is her family. Shear shared a story about her Norwegian side at a live Wisconsin Life storytelling event in Eau Claire at the Lakely.
About 150 years ago, a couple of Norwegians, Sivert Giri and Ingeborg Mael, emigrated from Norway to the United States and by 1920 had settled with their family in Dunn County. Sivert and Ingeborg had 4 sons and 2 daughters. From then on, you know how it goes. Those kids got married and had kids of their own, and the cycle repeated until it got to my dad. He met a gal with a big laugh and a bigger heart, my mom, and in 2000, yours truly popped out. Well, I'm pleased to report that 150 years later, the Giris are now, and maybe always have been, a bunch of loudmouth Norwegians. I think they taught me my first curse word, and my family knows how much I love those. It's cackling women who showed me I never needed to be silent or make myself small, and the quieter Giri men who have always worked with their hands and loved their family. But a room can get pretty stuffy when it's filled with a family as big as ours, so the Giris started having family get-togethers outdoors. One of those first planned family reunions was called Giri Fest. For the past near 20 years, my great-aunt Jayette and great-uncle Larry Giri have been hosting that family reunion at their Dunn County homestead. Annually, they welcome 70-plus loud-mouth family members for Labor Day weekend when Giri Fest is held. In my 24 years, I don't remember ever missing one year of Giri Fest. Through rain and humidity, Giris show up. I think that kind of commitment to Geary Fest is because of 3 things. There are 2 Midwestern potluck-style meals in one day. Hey. The Hestisco tournament, and because Great Aunt Jayette said so. And I'm sure most of you are curious, what's Hestisco? Hestisco translates from Norwegian to English as horseshoes, the game. Traditionally, people play horseshoes with horseshoes. Gearys don't do that. We use washers. And no, I've never won. My dad has, though, twice, so it's in my blood. Nowadays, my favorite part of the reunion is the silent auction. Every family that comes aims to bring at least one thing for it, and the money raised goes right back to the Geary Fund. Those funds cover the cost of hosting Geary Fest, but it's also a family fund. We've donated to family members with cancer. We've given money to members to go on mission trips. And my great uncle Larry added, don't forget about the headstones. Headstones? The whole reason Geary Fest even exists is because of those Norwegians who emigrated to America 150 years ago. But for a long time, the family didn't even know who was all part of our family tree. Great Aunt Jayette came across a headstone one day while visiting a Dunn County cemetery, and all it contained was 3 words: Mother, Father, Geary. When she asked my great uncle Larry, who was laid to rest there, he said, I don't know, men. So, for the past couple of decades, Great Aunt Jayette has made it her mission to not only identify the names of our Geary ancestors, but also to get to know them. She has so many stories of poring over archives of publications that no longer exist, through marriage certificates, and she's even stumbled across a couple of vintage wares at thrift sales that had the name Geary written on them. Frankly, I haven't appreciated all of that work and all of that history until recently, but I should have. I don't know who I would be if I didn't grow up in Wisconsin, and I don't know who I would be without the Gearys. I don't think I'd be a loudmouth, cursing, hardworking woman if I didn't spend every Labor Day weekend at Geary Fest. But I do know one thing. For the Gearys, UFTA means family. Thank you.
McKenna Shear shared that piece on Geary Fest at a live storytelling event in Eau Claire at the Lakely. It was hosted by WPR's Wisconsin Life and the Chippewa Valley Writers Guild. To hear her full story, go to wisconsinlife.org or check out the Wisconsin Life podcast. Wisconsin Life is a co-production of Wisconsin Public Radio and PBS Wisconsin in partnership with Wisconsin Humanities. Additional support comes from Lola Mary Peterson of Appleton. I'm Maureen McCullum.
This is Wisconsin Today.
Wisconsin State Park System turns 125 years old this year, and the State Department of Natural Resources is celebrating the anniversary all year long with a series of events and commemorations in parks around the state.
The park system started with the creation of Interstate Park in 1900 along the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway in northwestern Wisconsin.
Matthew Densau is Natural Resource Property Supervisor of Interstate Park, joining us from his office. Matthew, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Take us on a walk through the Interstate Park, Matthew. What are we going to see as we roam around there?
Well, what you're going to see is over 1,300 acres right along the St. Croix River Valley with our fantastic glacial potholes that we have. So our most popular trail in the park is going to be the Pothole Trail. On that, you get to see the glacial potholes, the Old Man of the Dalles Rock Formation. It also has the western terminus of the Ice Age Trail. So on that, you get some fantastic views of the river valley itself. Other parts of the park, we have over 82 campsites for our regular family campers that we have, along with 2 group campsites. We have over 7 shelters that we have, one of which is a historic CCC shelter that people can definitely use and enjoy. We have a fantastic swimming beach, great access to the St. Croix River for people who want to launch their canoes, kayaks, and just enjoy time on the river or enjoy it for fishing opportunities as well, along with the Ice Age Interpretive Center, where you can come learn about our glacial features found here and across the state of Wisconsin and catch a interpretive program that we have here. So lots to see and do here at Interstate Park.
Matthew, I spent a lot of my life avoiding potholes. Tell me about these glacial potholes and what we see.
Yeah, definitely. So what glacial potholes are is basically showing effects of glacial meltwater. So a long, long time ago, there was glacial Lake Duluth way up by what is Lake Superior currently, but at one point in time it broke through and it rushed down and created this current St. Croix River Valley that we have here. Now, one thing about the rock that we have here, it's basalt. So at one point, way even farther back, this was a rift valley. And when that happened, basalt formed, but it cooled really quickly with lots of cracks in it. So fast forward to when all that glacial meltwater was coming through, it burst through, creating the dells of the St. Croix. But also when all that water was traveling through, you had whirlpools. And what happened was you get debris that gets caught in it, and it drills into the rock itself. So that's why in this area right here, we have lots of glacial potholes, with Wisconsin, as we always like to say, having the world's most perfect pothole on our side of the river.
All right, how big are these potholes?
So they're going to vary in size. Our deepest one that we have on our side is going to be approximately 12 feet deep or so. And you're about a good 3 feet wide at the very top. Now, when you imagine these, they're not necessarily straight vertical shafts that go up and down. There's going to be a little bit of variation amongst it and everything. So we have some that are really small, and we also have that larger one here. Now, one thing that the Minnesota side can say that they have is they have a very deep one that goes like 60 feet in, which is why we always say we have the world's most perfect pothole on our side.
Now, I'm being careful with my language about the park here. It is the oldest state park in Wisconsin, but it isn't the first. Could you share some of that history?
Yeah, definitely. So in the 1870s, the legislature actually set aside some public domain land as the state park in northern Wisconsin. So think Vilas, Oneida, that kind of general area and everything. However, there wasn't a lot of people in the area, and there was nothing that really kind of happened with it. So as such, you had timber interests of the day, and it all really kind of fell apart. So by the 1890s, 1897, somewhere in there, the legislature actually did away with that state park and just kind of sold that all off. However, on the Wisconsin side and Minnesota side, there was local citizens, George Hazard and Henry Baker. They were very interested in protecting the dells of the St. Croix. And with that, they petitioned each individual state to go ahead and preserve this area. Now, Minnesota beat us to it, so they formed their side of Interstate Park in 1895. Ours was formed in 1900, with September 20th being the first acquisition date for the properties here at Interstate Park, which is why it's our anniversary date here coming up this year.
And Matthew, make a pitch for people maybe further away in the state, southern, southeastern part of the state, that, hey, maybe plan a trip that includes interstate.
Yeah, definitely. So interstate, being the oldest and the western terminus of the Ice Age Trail, we have the Ice Age Interpretive Center. We are one of 9 scientific reserve units for the Ice Age that we have here. So we're honored to have that distinction because of the glacial potholes here. And that's kind of a precursor for before the Ice Age Trail was finalized. And that's a whole different story on that one. But also you have multiple other properties that are quite nearby. So just to the south of us, there's Willow River State Park right outside of Hudson that has fantastic waterfalls, very busy property. Or if you want the opposite spectrum of that, you have Straight Lake, which is 30 minutes away. That is meant to be quiet. You go back and you reflect on nature and you can just reconnect, along with Governor Knoll State Forest, which is just to the north of us as well. So there's lots of opportunity just in the surrounding area right here for whatever type of recreational opportunity you are looking to partake in.
Matthew, we'll leave it there, and happy anniversary.
Thank you. And I hope to see lots of people come out and help us celebrate.
That was Matthew Densow, Superintendent of Interstate Park in northwestern Wisconsin, on the park's 125-year history. Continuing our conversation on the anniversary of the Wisconsin State Park System, we have Missy Van Landet, Recreation Partnership Section Chief for the DNR. Missy, welcome back to Wisconsin Today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we've got 125 years of Wisconsin's state park system and counting now in the books. What kind of things are we looking at for marking this milestone?
We have a ton of things coming up this year. We started the year with our candlelight hike and ski events where we did have snow. And now we're moving into, the month of April and May here. We're looking at a lot of different Work Play Earth Day events. that are all across the state where people can volunteer at their local state parks. We've also got the Happy Little Trees 5K, which is a virtual on your own way to run a 5K and support the state park system. And then as we get into June, July, and August, many more opportunities, including our Free Fun Weekend, which is going to take place the first weekend in June. We've got hundreds and hundreds of events scheduled across the state as we do every year, but most of those will have a 125th anniversary spin to them. So a great way to get out there and get some free giveaway items, participate in some how-to events, and learn more about the state park system. So we have a ton of things going on this year to celebrate the anniversary.
Now, we're talking to you, of course, in the spring. What do you have your eye on for great activities around Wisconsin, whether or not they're connected with that anniversary at our state parks?
Yeah, I always tell people I have a lot of different favorite state parks and a lot of different things that I like to do. I think one thing that many people don't realize is that we have a pretty robust rental system and checkout system. So if you're new to outdoor recreation and you want to check out kayaking or biking, or if it's the winter cross-country skiing or snowshoeing, we actually have on our Find a Park page on our webpage, you can actually check out where our rentals are. So not only do we have programs around learning to do things, but you can check out equipment too before you commit to purchasing it. So it's a great way to experience all that the state parks have to offer. We are also really increasing our volunteer opportunities this year through our Invasive Species Awareness Weekend coming up in June. And then we'll be focusing on universal recreation in July to celebrate the anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act and showcasing that it doesn't matter what your ability is or what your experience level is, you can get out and recreate regardless.
I wanted to ask you about both of those, actually. Let's start with volunteering. If people are thinking, hey, I love my local state park, or maybe not so local, and I'd like to get involved in taking care of it, how do they get involved?
Yeah, so pretty much everything starts with our webpage, dnr.wi.gov. They can type in volunteering. It'll take you to our volunteer database. And there you can actually search by property or by type of activity that you want to do. So those are great opportunity to check it out on our webpage. There's lots of different things, whether you want to do trail maintenance or campground maintenance. Maybe you want to volunteer as a campground host where you actually get to stay in the campground for a period of time and assist other campers with getting set up at their site, cleaning up sites, that kind of thing. Or maybe you want to volunteer in one of our nature centers. So there's opportunities whether you want to volunteer for one time, for one afternoon, maybe with a Girl Scout troop, or you want to volunteer for consistently over the year. So that's a great place to start. You can also volunteer with a friends group. We have over 64 different friends groups across the state that are associated with our state park system. And that's a great way to get involved with events and programs. And lastly, if you're just out at your favorite state park, stop in at the office and ask any one of the staff members that are around.
Missy, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Missy Van Landet is the Recreation Partnerships Section Chief for the Department of Natural Resources. We also heard from Matthew Densau, Superintendent of Interstate Park in northwestern Wisconsin, about the park's 125-year history. That's as the state marks the 125th anniversary of the state park system in general. If you have a favorite park to go to, maybe you volunteer there, you're about to volunteer there, tell us about it. Email wisconsintoday@wpr.org. That's wisconsintoday@wpr.org.
On the show, Rob and I get to talk with so many different people. And tomorrow, actually, we'll meet a New York City milliner who is a famous hat designer for the Kentucky Derby and created a collection of Wisconsin cheese-inspired hats for the Derby that's coming up.
And that makes us wonder, if you were going to go to the Kentucky Derby, how would you show off Wisconsin? What would you wear on your head that speaks to the place you call home?
Or how about this? Is there a story behind a special hat or perhaps a lucky hat that you like to wear?
We'll take your hats and Kentucky Derby cheese head pots. Bring them on. Email Wisconsin Today at WPR.org, or you can call or text us anytime. The number is 888-642-0232.
Wisconsin Today producers include Mackenzie Crummy, Lauren Cox, and Royce Podeswa. Our technical directors are Sarah Hopeful and Tyler Ditter. Learn more about us at WPR.org/Wisconsin Today. I'm Kate Archer-Kent.
And I'm Rob Farrett. You're listening to WPR News.